He wanted nothing to do with me.
Jerry Lewis cut all 6 sons out of his multi-million-dollar will.
All 5 of his surviving sons would be disinherited. They would not be left a penny of the estimated $50 million estate.
And the youngest son died in solitude after years of addiction.
As Les Trent reports, Jerry's youngest son has died, a pauper.
A glamorous Hollywood family behind the doors of the Bel Air mansion.
The autopsy report says he finally died from acute morphine intoxication in Utah last October 24th.
Lay coldness abuse and wounds that never healed.
I just can't even understand how he still cannot forgive his dead son.
Who could have imagined that the king of comedy, who once made the whole world laugh, would leave tragedy to his own flesh and blood?
Anthony says he was hit with a belt on 2 occasions.
Emotional abuse, it was every day.
That legendary name had conquered the stage, the silver screen, and brought in billions of dollars for charity. But within the family, he became a source of fear for his children. The bitter revelations from Jerry Lewis's own son after his death.
I don't know where my brothers were when that happened, but they were all in the same room. He says, "I'm not leaving anybody anything."
Shocked the public and opened up a wave of controversy that has not ended.
Comedy legend Jerry Lewis has died. Jerry Lewis was 91.
This is a story of fame, kinship, and the chilling truth behind the lights. Jerry Lewis married singer Patty Palmer in 1944. Over more than 3 decades together, they had 6 sons: Gary Lewis, Ronald, Stephen Lewis, Scott, Anthony Lewis, Christopher Joseph Lewis, Anthony Joseph Lewis, and Joseph Christopher Lewis. The family lived in a grand mansion in Bel Air, often likened to a Hollywood palace. But according to Patty Palmer, the marriage was far from peaceful. She endured a selfish husband consumed by work and entangled in frequent affairs.
Anthony says when he was growing up, you never knew which Jerry Lewis would come home at night.
For the children, their childhood in that house was not a time of comfort and happiness, but of constant unease. Anthony Joseph Lewis, born in 1959, recounted haunting memories many times.
When he'd show up and park right in front of the big front door, my mom would get on the intercom and would say, "Your father's home."
In an interview with Inside Edition in 2017, he described how whenever their father returned home, his mother would use the intercom system to give a signal. At the words, "Your father is home," the children scattered to their rooms trying to avoid the unpredictable man.
We could never predict his behavior on a given day.
Anthony admitted he was whipped with a belt only twice, but what truly haunted him was the tense atmosphere and the endless shouting. He said it was cruel. You never knew which version of Jerry you were going to get when he walked in at night. Anthony remembered vividly the feeling of not existing in his father's eyes. "We were like invisible children," he shared. Though surrounded by luxury, what he and his brothers lacked most was care and familial affection. Each son had his own view of Jerry Lewis. Gary Lewis, the eldest, born in 1945, found success in music. His band, Gary Lewis and the Playboys, scored a #1 hit in 1965 with This Diamond Ring. Even so, Gary did not hesitate to criticize his father, especially after the death of his brother Joseph. He once said that Joseph's death was partly from a broken heart after being abandoned by their father. Ronald Stephen Lewis, born in 1949 and adopted by Jerry, lived a rather quiet life, rarely appearing in public. Scott Anthony Lewis, born in 1956, also seldom spoke out about the family, mentioned only occasionally in discussions of the harsh childhood shared by the Lewis brothers. Christopher Joseph Lewis, born in 1957, held an opposite view. He once collaborated with his father in filmmaking and often defended Jerry's reputation. Christopher stated, "My father was generous, and I was very close to him my whole life." To him, the image of Jerry Lewis was tied to charity work and contributions to the arts. Joseph Christopher Lewis, born in 1964, was the youngest and also the family's greatest tragedy. He battled addiction for many years before dying on October 24, 2009, at the age of 45 from acute morphine intoxication in Utah. Before his death, Joseph expressed feeling abandoned by his father, left without support at his most desperate times. His passing deepened the rift that already existed in the family. Gary publicly held his father accountable, declaring that Jerry had turned his back on Joseph. Jerry Lewis himself admitted to shortcomings. In a 2014 interview, he said, "The pain was that I neglected the children who needed me, that they had to say, 'Dad wasn't there when I needed him.'" This confession revealed a side of regret, but it came far too late to heal the wounds his children had suffered.
I'm really sorry that I didn't have any one-on-one time with him to express that I love him.
On the surface, the Lewis family lived in wealth and fame. But behind the closed doors of the Bel Air mansion were distance-heavy silences and a childhood devoid of warmth. For Anthony Joseph Lewis, those experiences left lifelong scars, and they were the very reason he chose to speak out after decades of silence. That harsh childhood seemed to have ended, but many years later, when Jerry Lewis passed away, a colder truth emerged. The will that was revealed erased the names of all 6 sons and even the biological grandchildren, turning the childhood fear into the final wound. What could drive a father to make such a merciless decision? The cruel will that shocked the public. In 2012, Jerry Lewis drafted a new will with contents that stirred public debate for years afterward. In this legal document, he stated explicitly that he intentionally excluded all 6 sons from his first marriage to Patty Palmer, along with their descendants. That meant not only his biological sons, but also the next generation of grandchildren were cut out of any inheritance rights. The entire estate, estimated at around $50 million USD, was left to his second wife Sandy Pitnick and their adopted daughter Danielle, whom Jerry and Sandy had taken in later. According to People magazine, the revelation of the will caused a major shock while also reflecting the long history of tension within the Lewis family. Forbes analyzed that Jerry's choice of a will instead of a trust was not just a legal decision. It was a way for him to make his choice public and emphatic. Furthermore, the repeated phrase "and their descendants" in the document showed his clear intention to block any future claims from grandchildren. An inheritance lawyer once commented in the press, "Legally, he had every right to do that. Parents are not obligated to leave assets to their children. As long as the will is valid, the court will uphold it." While this statement affirmed the legality, it did nothing to lessen the emotional weight of Jerry's decision. Shortly after the will was disclosed, Anthony Joseph Lewis appeared on Inside Edition. It was the first time he publicly spoke about the pain he had kept inside for many years. Anthony Joseph Lewis described, "I knew I was not going to get anything but the fact that he cut out the grandchildren. It was like twisting the knife deeper." His words revealed not only his own sorrow, but also the pain carried on to the next generation. For Anthony, the act was not about money, but a total denial of family bonds. He added that his only wish never fulfilled was the chance to tell his father a simple sentence, "I love you." What Anthony recalled was not just memory, but a reminder of the gap between public image and private life. For many, the story raised questions about the true value of fame and the cost borne by family when one person dedicates everything to career. The public reacted strongly. Some believed Anthony was brave to speak out and called Jerry Lewis a monster behind the smile. They saw it as proof that behind the facade of a stage legend was a father who inflicted pain on his own family. Others took the opposite view. A portion of the audience believed Anthony exaggerated to seek attention. The debate only made the Lewis family story more complex, reflecting the many lenses through which the public views famous figures. Gary Lewis, the eldest son, was not surprised. He had shared that estrangement from his father had lasted for years, and being excluded from the will was only further confirmation. Gary made it clear that he never expected to receive anything, as the father-son relationship had long been broken. Observers noted that this harsh decision could not be separated from the marital conflicts between Jerry Lewis and Patty Palmer. Their divorce, after more than 30 years, left lasting wounds which may have directly shaped Jerry's view of the children from that marriage. In addition, the struggles with addiction of Joseph, the youngest son, were also cited as a reason for Jerry's disappointment and his desire to cut off any financial ties. For the public, the image of a man once associated with charity work, raising billions of dollars for patients, while turning his back on 6 biological children and even grandchildren, created a stark contradiction. The media called it a shocking snub. Debate followed: was this decision born of an authoritarian nature, scars from a broken marriage, or disappointment in his role as a father? What is certain is that the will marked the final boundary in the family relationship. It confirmed the estrangement that had already existed and brought everything into the light in a way that could not be denied. The children who once felt invisible in their childhood were erased again, even in their father's final legal document. What Anthony Joseph Lewis revealed exposed another side of a family once thought to be perfect. The contrast grew sharper when set against Jerry Lewis's career, where the stage lights and artistic triumphs always walked hand in hand with the shadows of his private life. Glory and shadows side by side. Jerry Lewis was born in 1926 into a Jewish show business family in Newark, New Jersey. His father was a stage performer, and his mother worked in entertainment at local theaters. From a very young age, Jerry traveled with his parents on tour and quickly became familiar with the backstage atmosphere. He first appeared on stage at the age of 5, trying his hand at simple lip-syncing and comic skits. In his teenage years, Jerry dropped out of high school to pursue art, often performing in small clubs. During this period, he honed skills in mimicry, facial expressions, and physical comedy elements that later became trademarks of his career. Growing up with both the spotlight of the stage and the financial pressures of his family shaped his style and fueled his ambition for fame. Jerry Lewis is remembered above all as an extraordinary comedian. Alongside Dean Martin, he formed the duo Martin and Lewis in 1946, which quickly became a phenomenon for an entire decade. They performed in nightclubs, on television, and in films, starring together in 16 comedies that were warmly received by audiences. After parting ways with Dean Martin in 1956, Jerry continued his solo career and proved his independence with a series of successful works, most notably The Nutty Professor in 1963. The film not only generated significant revenue, but also established his signature style, a blend of humor and pathos, a fusion that became Jerry's hallmark. Alongside his film career, Jerry was devoted to the Muscular Dystrophy Association telethon. From 1966 to 2010, he became a familiar face on television during each fundraising event. Over more than 40 years leading the telethon, Jerry helped raise over $2.6 billion USD for patients. For this work, he received the Jean Hirschholt Humanitarian Award in 2009, one of the Academy's most prestigious honors, recognizing humanitarian contributions. In addition, numerous organizations in Europe honored him as an influential director and actor. But his dazzling career was accompanied by a turbulent private life. In an interview with GQ, Jerry admitted to having affairs with Marilyn Monroe and Marlene Dietrich, calling them unforgettable adventures. Such confessions reinforced the image of a man who lived passionately while also highlighting a personal life detached from family ties. Many colleagues spoke of Jerry with caution, describing him as hot-tempered, difficult to work with, and possessing an oversized ego. These remarks stood in stark contrast to the witty smile that audiences knew so well on screen. The shadows around Jerry grew darker in 2022, when Vanity Fair published a series of accusations from several actresses who had worked with him in the 1960s. Karen Sharp, his co-star in The Ladies' Man, recounted that Jerry suddenly lunged at her, pressed himself against her, and began rubbing as if engaging in sex. She said she escaped only after slapping him. Another actress, Hope Holliday, also claimed that Jerry lunged, groped, and pulled down his zipper. These accounts thrust Jerry into the spotlight of the Me Too movement, forcing the public to reevaluate a figure once celebrated as a humanitarian icon. The allegations highlighted not only his behavior, but also a broader film industry environment, where Jerry, with his influence, could overpower others. Beyond his private life and scandals, Jerry also left behind a project that was never completed but is frequently revisited: The Day the Clown Cried. The film told the story of a clown imprisoned in a Nazi concentration camp, tasked with leading children to the gas chambers. Jerry directed and starred in the project. Although the script was bold in concept, production was dragged down by copyright disputes and artistic issues. When it was finished, Jerry himself admitted it was a terrible film and chose not to release it. The work was locked away in archives, shown only in limited screenings to a few scholars years later. To the public, the film became a symbol of Jerry's complicated career, a deeply creative artist who also made irrevocable mistakes. Jerry Lewis's career and private life are therefore seen through two opposing lenses. On one hand, he was a comedy legend, a symbol of humanitarianism through charity. On the other, he was a controversial man, leaving behind scars within his family, his colleagues, and a host of questions that never found clear answers. Between glory and scandal, the image of Jerry Lewis emerges full of contradictions. A legend who made the world laugh, but who was also remembered by family and colleagues as a source of wounds. When the stage lights faded, the question that remained was not about films or awards, but about which legacy would endure immortal laughter or the fractures within his own household. Controversies that lingered after death. After Jerry Lewis passed away, the public and his family were divided into opposing camps when speaking of him. For Gary Lewis, the eldest son being excluded from the will was not a shock. He once said he was not surprised since the distance with his father had lasted for decades. Still, Gary remembered the advice Jerry once gave him: "Do whatever you want, but do it with all your heart." For Gary, that remained one of the rare fragments of memory, showing that his father at times revealed encouragement. Christopher Joseph Lewis, born in 1957, chose instead to defend his father's image. In interviews, Christopher emphasized, "My father was generous, and I was always close to him." He had worked with Jerry on film projects and even published material about his father's career. For Christopher, Jerry Lewis was a highly influential artist, a man dedicated to charity, and someone who deserved to be remembered for what he contributed to the community. But within the same family, other voices painted a different portrait. Anthony Joseph Lewis and Gary made no effort to hide their bitterness, claiming that neglect and distance had left lasting scars. The story of Joseph Christopher Lewis, the youngest son who died alone in 2009 from morphine overdose, became the most heartbreaking proof of that divide. For Patty Palmer, Jerry Lewis's first wife, their marriage of more than 30 years was not a love story, but a long period of endurance. Patty once recalled that the union ended because of repeated infidelity and Jerry's extravagant lifestyle. After the divorce, she lived quietly and passed away in 2021 at the age of 99. She left behind candid remarks. Jerry was a brilliant performer, but within the family, he was not a trustworthy husband. Beyond his 6 sons and official marriage, Jerry Lewis also had an illegitimate daughter, Susan Lewis. Susan lived in poverty for many years, even experiencing homelessness, and died in 2022 without ever being acknowledged by her father. Her story became another fragment of a broken family where bonds of kinship were cut off from the start. Critics' assessments of Jerry Lewis reflected this same complexity. Many insisted he left a legacy greater than comedy, deeply divisive in his role as a father. His film career, with its classics and more than 4 decades of charity work, cemented Jerry as an irreplaceable figure. At the same time, accounts from his family revealed another man full of contradictions and sources of pain. Some commentators argued that Jerry Lewis's artistic legacy and his family legacy should be viewed separately. Others disagreed, saying the wounds he left behind for his children could not be ignored, as they were part of who he was. The way the public remembers Jerry has therefore remained split between respect and reproach. Jerry Lewis was both an artist who helped shape modern comedy and a celebrated philanthropist who raised billions of dollars for muscular dystrophy patients. But he was also a man described by his own children in chilling terms. When his name is mentioned, audiences remember the laughter on screen, the all-night telethons, but also the fractured family stories. The legacy Jerry Lewis left behind was therefore twofold immortal in art, broken in family. And perhaps that is the most complex truth about a figure once adored worldwide. Jerry Lewis will always be regarded as a symbol of 20th century comedy, a man capable of making millions laugh with nothing more than a walk-a glance or a raised eyebrow. He was also a familiar face in charity, tied to the telethon for over 4 decades, and leaving a lasting mark on popular culture. But behind that brilliance lies another story, where his children grew up in loneliness, fear, and a void of affection. Between those two images, it is up to the audience to choose how to remember him. Will Jerry Lewis live on in memory as an immortal artist, or as a father who left wounds that never healed? If Jerry Lewis's story makes you reflect, share your thoughts below. Should he be remembered as a legendary artist or as a deeply flawed father? And do not forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you will not miss the next videos exploring the hidden sides of Hollywood's glittering lights.